Top 10 people who were convicted for the work of serial killers. Welcome back to Creepshow, where we dive deep into the darkest corners of true crime and chilling mysteries. Today's video is about the most unsettling cases where innocent people were wrongfully convicted for the horrific crimes of serial killers. These tragic stories reveal how desperation, poor investigations, and misjudgment led to stolen years, ruined lives, and in some cases, even cost people their lives. So, sit back, get comfortable, and let's explore 10 cases of wrongfully convicted individuals who paid the price for the deadly actions of serial killers. Number 10, Benjamin Miller. Black prostitutes' remains began to appear alongside the Merritt Parkway close to Stamford, Connecticut, in 1967. 5 of them had been located by 1971. Using their own bras, the victims had all been strangled to death. Benjamin Miller was the sole suspect that George Mayer, the lead investigator, had. But there was no proof linking Miller to any of the killings. Miller was a schizophrenic postal worker. He was well known in the seedier areas of Stamford as a self-styled preacher who yelled at prostitutes and swung his Bible at them. Miller had at least once paid for a prostitute's company, so his anti-prostitution stance wasn't all that strong. Mayer made the decision to question Miller despite the lack of tangible proof. He then worked with a physician at a mental health facility after being admitted there. Miller, who was insane, confessed to killing the women while he was in the hospital. Consequently, he was accused of killing them. 4 months later, a man who was well known for taking advantage of black prostitutes, Robert Lupinacci, was taken into custody after attempting to strangle a woman close to the parkway. However, there was more proof than only his effort to commit the same murder in the same location as the Bra murders. Lupinacci's vehicle was spotted close to both the crime scenes and the locations the victims frequently visited. The police discovered black women's hair inside his car. A set of pornographic playing cards was among the most damaging pieces of evidence that Lupinacci's vehicle had. Near one of the bodies, authorities had discovered a card from a pornographic deck a year prior. Lupinacci's deck lacked a Queen of Hearts like that. Neither the district attorney nor mayor was persuaded by this. Miller was institutionalized after entering a not guilty plea on the grounds of insanity. Miller had committed 3 murders. As part of a plea agreement, 2 of the 5 initial murder counts were dismissed. An attorney learned of the tale 10 years later. He maintained in court during the ensuing 7 years that Miller was not the real murderer. In 1988, Miller was given another chance at trial following his 16 years of incarceration in a mental health facility for an unfounded offense. He was declared free after the accusations against him were dropped. But years of institutionalization had made it impossible for him to live outside of it, so he willingly committed himself. February 2010, he passed away at the age of 80. Lupinacci consistently denied committing the Bra murders and was never charged in their case. He maintained that the only crime he had ever committed was the assault for which he had served a 3-year sentence. Lupinacci never again had an altercation with the law. In February of 2014, he passed away from natural causes. Regarding Mayer, the person who put Miller in jail, he remained steadfast in his conviction that Miller was the murderer. Mayer eventually rose to the position of Stamford police chief. November 2014 saw his passing. Number 9, William Avery. The 39-year-old Marietta Griffin's body was discovered in a garage trash pile in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on February 17, 1998. Griffin was a prostitute who had been killed by strangulation. During their murder investigation, the police linked Griffin to William Avery's crack house. Avery voluntarily walked in to be interviewed after learning that he was being sought after by the authorities. Avery claimed in an affidavit that he remembered grabbing her when Griffin was at the crack house earlier in the interview, but he then went completely dark. Avery subsequently claimed, nevertheless, that this was untrue. In the end, Avery and his drug-dealing buddy were taken into custody by the authorities. Avery was charged with drugs even though there was no proof linking him to the murder. In 1998, he was found guilty and given a 10-year prison term. 6 years into his prison term, Avery was charged with first-degree reckless homicide in 2004 after informants from the jailhouse claimed that Avery had confessed to killing Griffin. After being found guilty, he received a 40-year prison sentence. The CODIS system had received the DNA from the Griffin murder, but a match to the jailed true killer's DNA didn't show up when it should have. Walter Ellis, a cunning killer, persuaded a fellow prisoner to provide his DNA sample to the database in lieu of Ellis's in 2001. Ellis's non-submission of his DNA appears to have been known to state officials, but they took no action. In 2010, 9 years later, Ellis had at last turned in his DNA. It matched the DNA recovered from 7 women's homicides. At that point, Avery sent a letter to the district attorney requesting a new test on the DNA from the Griffin murder. It was set up by the DA, and sure enough, it connected Ellis to the killing. In May 2010, Avery was freed from prison. He obtained a settlement of more than $1 million by suing. Ellis, meanwhile, entered a guilty plea to the murders of 7 women during a 21-year period. In 2013, he passed away while incarcerated. Number 8. Jacob's beard. Nancy Santomero, 19, and Vicky Durian, 26, took a rideshare from Iowa to West Virginia in June 1980 in order to attend the Rainbow Gathering, which is a gathering of a hippie-style group called the Rainbow Family that emphasizes understanding, love, and peace. Sadly, none of the 2 women was able to attend the party. On June 25th, their bodies were discovered in a field. They'd been shot at close range several times. The case was unopened for 2 years. The Rainbow family's decision to congregate in their county was not well received by the community to start. The family was subjected to harassment by the inhabitants, who even fired rounds in their direction. Additionally, the locals did not make a special effort to assist with the investigation. Even still, one local resident caught the attention of the police, an unidentified guy who had called Durian's parents to complain that the police were failing in their duties. The cops tapped the family's line because the call had upset them. Once more, the man called. The culprit was identified as 36-year-old Jacob Beard, whose identity was already known to the police due to his reported killing of his girlfriend's cat and disposing of its corpse on her bed. Beard told several bizarre accounts about the crime when the cops confronted him. He claimed, for instance, to have seen additional locals close to the gathering, even though they had all denied it. 3 months after the deaths of Santomero and Durian, 2 villagers killed a 3rd woman, according to Beard, and disposed of her body with his corn chopper. After investigating, police soon found that Beard was lying. 3 years following the murder, a guy by the name of Lee Morrison went to the police and said that Gerald Brown, a local, was the real murderer. Morrison claimed that while Brown was driving them about the night of the murders, he had been drinking. Morrison lost consciousness. Upon awakening, he learned that Brown had killed the 2 females. Morrison assisted Brown in disposing of the dead. The murders were charged against Brown. Morrison did, however, admit at the preliminary hearing that he had made up the tale at Beard's request after the latter had threatened to harm Morrison's family if he didn't carry out his threat. The case thereafter became unresponsive. 12 years after the Rainbow murders in 1992, a new police detective made the decision to take the case again. When he started questioning the locals, Jacob Beard's name kept coming up. Even 2 guys claimed to have witnessed Beard murder the 2 girls. Beard was accused with 2 murders, based on the testimony of witnesses. In June 1993, Beard was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release, despite the fact that the witnesses frequently contradicted one another, changed their accounts, and even recanted. Joseph Franklin, a death row white supremacist serial killer, admitted to the Rainbow murders a year after the case was decided. Franklin claimed, "I committed the Rainbow murders, you know. The Rainbow killings were a little different because I just picked them up hitchhiking." Franklin targeted primarily interracial couples, African Americans, and Jews. He then sketched a map showing the location of the bodies. After learning of the confession, Beard's attorneys filed a writ to have Beard's conviction reversed. That was not until 1999, following Beard's 6-year prison sentence. Beard was acquitted in a retrial in May 2000. In addition, he consented to a $2 million compensation for an incorrect conviction. Although Franklin was found guilty of 7 murders, at least 22 individuals are thought to have died at his hands. In addition, he shot civil rights leader Vernon Jordan Jr. and rendered Hustler publisher Larry Flynt paralyzed. Benjamin was put to death on November 20, 2013. Number 7. David Allen Jones. In 1992, 3 prostitutes' bodies were discovered strangled in the vicinity of a South Los Angeles primary school over the course of a few months. In the process of searching their files for sexual offenders, the police found evidence of David Allen Jones' involvement in 2 sexual offenses that occurred close to the school. Jones was a janitor with profound mental impairments. He was no smarter than an 8-year-old. Jones had been arrested years before for being at the school with a prostitute. He was detained following the 3 killings for allegedly trying to rape a prostitute. Without an attorney present, Jones was questioned for 2 days, using leading questions. Even though he didn't commit the murders, the mentally ill man admitted to them during interrogation. He was found guilty in 1995 on 1 count of rape, 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter, and 1 count of second-degree murder. He received a prison term ranging from 36 years to life. A little over 10 years later, the Cold Case Unit of the Los Angeles Police Department started looking into the deaths of multiple women who had been strangled between 1987 and 1998. After the DNA was processed by CODIS, Chester Turner, whose sole noteworthy employment was as a pizza delivery man, was connected to 10 murders, including ones that were purportedly carried out by Jones. Turner was already serving a jail sentence due to his prior rape conviction. Jones was released from prison in 2004, following the revelation. He later received $74,600 from the state and $720,000 from the city of Los Angeles as payment for the 11 years he had been incarcerated. Turner was ultimately found guilty of 15 murders and given 2 death sentences. Number 6. Anthony Capozzi. A string of rapes took place in Buffalo, New York's Delaware Park between December 1983 and July 1984. According to the women, the perpetrator took hold of them from the back and made threats to shoot them. He would instruct the victim to remain on the ground for an additional 10 to 20 minutes after he left after each rape. Then he would just bolt. There were few suspects, and a year went by without any arrests. Then, less than 1.6 kilometers, 1 mile from the location of the rapes, a former police officer noticed Anthony Capozzi, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, acting oddly at a coffee shop. Capozzi appeared to fit the women's broad description. Capozzi was taken to the station by the police, where he was put in a lineup. He was recognized by several victims as the perpetrator of their rapes. There were a few obvious issues, though. Although Capozzi weighed 100 kilograms, 220 pounds, and never worked out, 3 of the women characterized the man as being athletic and weighing between 68 and 73 kilograms, 150 and 160 pounds. Capozzi also had a very noticeable scar above his left eye that measured 7.6 centimeters, 3 in, but none of the victims brought it up. Capozzi faced 3 charges of sexual assault in the absence of any tangible proof, such as the gun used during the rapes. He was convicted guilty of 2 of the rapes in 1987 and found not guilty of the 3rd, according to the victims' testimonies. His prison term ranged from 11 to 35 years. The rapes continued since Capozzi wasn't the real bike path rapist. In actuality, in 1990, the violence reached a murderous level. In 1992, there was another murder. Capozzi was allowed to begin the parole application process in 1997. But in order for parole to be granted, he needed to acknowledge his actions and express regret. Capozzi believed he couldn't do it because he wasn't the one who had done the acts. He requested parole every 2 years, but each time it was denied, a total of 5 times. Then, in September 2006, a woman was killed in Buffalo close to a bike lane. It was committed exactly 16 years after a different woman had been strangled beside a bike route with a piece of rope. The police became interested in that. Additionally, the police were aware of the connection to the initial 1990 murder. They went through the records from the 2 earlier killings in search of leads, and they found connections between the killings and a string of unresolved rapes. It didn't take them long to determine that a single individual was behind the crimes. They also realized that, while the true bike path rapist was still at large and on the loose, Capozzi was most likely an innocent guy incarcerated. Detectives discovered that one victim had written down the attacker's car's license plate in the case file from one of the rapes. The car's owner had an alibi at the time, and the police had followed up on their tip. Years later, when they went back to re-interview the car's owner, he acknowledged that he wasn't driving the vehicle at the time of the rape. Artemio Sanchez, his nephew, had been at the wheel instead. Sanchez was taken into custody when he and the rape victim's descriptions coincided. After a DNA test, he was connected to the 3 killings and numerous rapes. The judges were persuaded to authorize DNA testing in Capozzi's cases by his attorneys. The hospital initially believed that the rape kits had been misplaced or destroyed. Fortunately for Capozzi, though, the samples turned up in a drawer. Testing revealed that Sanchez was the true bike path rapist, and Capozzi was innocent. New York State settled with Capozzi for $4.25 million. This was excellent as far as he and his family were concerned, but it would never make up for the 22 years he had missed. Sanchez acknowledged that he had committed 12 rapes and 3 killings. For the 3 killings in 2007, he received a sentence ranging from 75 years to life in prison. For the rapes, the statute of limitations had expired. Number 5, Townsend Jerry Frank. Numerous African-American women were discovered dead in Florida's Broward and Miami-Dade counties between 1973 and 1979. One was Sonia Marion, a 13-year-old who was discovered dead after being raped and beaten. Police thought Jerry Frank Townsend, a Carnival employee with an IQ of 50, was the murderer. During their interview, he admitted to carrying out 23 killings all throughout the nation. Townsend was convicted of 6 murders and 1 rape, but not the murder of Sonia Marion. He received 7 consecutive life sentences for the other offenses. He had been tried but acquitted. But since Townsend was not the murderer, the true culprit could continue his search. 10 more women and children are thought to have perished as a result of the incorrect conviction. The Sun-Sentinel published an article in 1988 claiming Eddie Lee Mosley was a likely suspect in 12 murders and 40 rapes, including the ones for which Townsend had been found guilty. Mosley suffered with mental illness. Because of his dysfunctional conduct, he had left school at the age of 13, even though he was still in the 3rd grade. He had been a garbage man in his adult life and had been arrested multiple times for sex offenses. Several women came forward to identify him as their rapist, leading to charges of 3 counts of sexual battery against him. In spite of being declared innocent due to insanity, Mosley spent several years in a mental health facility during the 1970s. The rapes and strangulations in the Fort Lauderdale area ceased during that period. The crimes recurred once he was freed. In 1988, Mosley was once more placed in a mental health facility. DNA evidence connected him to the demise of a minimum of 8 females. He was never charged, though, as it was determined he was unable to stand trial. Despite all of this, it wasn't until 2001, during the investigation of the unsolved murder of 13-year-old Sonia Marion, that the DNA evidence from the alleged Townsend murders was examined. Townsend had been imprisoned for 2 murders, one of which Mosley was linked to at the time. This raised serious questions about the veracity of Townsend's confessions in 4 more killings. Townsend served 22 years in jail before being released due to the discovery of new DNA evidence and concerns raised over the veracity of his admissions. The city of Miami and Broward County paid him a compensation of $4.2 million. Mosley is thought to have killed 17 people and committed 41 rapes between 1973 and 1987. Mosley passed away in a Florida hospital in May 2020 at the age of 73. Number 4. Julie Rhee Harper. The beginning of Julie Rhea Harper's living nightmare was October 13, 1997. She rushed to check on her 10-year-old son Joel after hearing a scream in her Lawrenceville, Illinois, home. There was nothing on his bed. A man in a mask attacked her while she was looking for him. After a fight, she chased the man outside. During the process, 2 glass doors were broken. The man attacked her outside before turning to leave into the darkness. When the police were contacted, Rhea Harper initially believed Joel had been abducted. Joel was discovered, though, when the police searched the residence. His lifeless form rested amidst his bed and the wall. He had sustained multiple chest stab wounds. Rhea Harper refused to acknowledge that she had slain her son. But because of circumstantial evidence, she was the major suspect. The knife was from the kitchen, there were no indications of forced entry, and the remaining pieces of evidence came from her actions the night of the murder and in the days that followed. Rhea Harper's ex-husband, a police officer, testified that she had thought about aborting the fetus while she was pregnant and expressed her position toward custody as follows: "If I can't have Joel, you can't either." She went on trial in 2002. The largest error she made was refusing to testify on her own behalf. A jury found her guilty after 5 hours of deliberation. She was then given a 65-year prison term for her son's horrific stabbing death. Texas-based true crime author Diane Fanning saw Rhea Harper's story on 20/20 after her conviction. Joel's murder struck Fanning as having a lot in common with the acts of Tommy Lynn Sells, a wanderer and serial murderer who Fanning was researching for a book. Fanning was aware that Sells had been around when Joel was killed. In neighboring Springfield, Missouri, on October 15, 1997, 2 days after Joel was killed, Sells had sexually assaulted and killed a 13-year-old girl while she was in bed. Joel's murder was mentioned by Fanning in her correspondence with Sells. In response, Sells admitted in writing that 2 days before to the Springfield murder, he had committed another crime. He had broken into a house on October 13th, killed a young individual with a knife, got into a fight with a woman, and then made off. A fresh trial for Rhea Harper was granted in 2004 on a technicality. Rhea Harper was found not guilty of the crime at her second hearing in 2006, when Sells' confession was accepted as evidence. Sells acknowledged 50 killings, yet some of them turned out to be untrue. 15 killings and 2 attempted murders were verified by investigators. On April 3, 2014, Sells was put to death for killing 13-year-old Kayleen Harris in 1999 as she was asleep in her bed. Number 3. Alejandro Hernandez and Rolando Cruz. 10-year-old Janine Nicarico was by herself in her family's Naperville, Illinois, home on February 25, 1983. Sick from school, she was at home. The front door was kicked in when her older sister came back. The dog was cowering in the basement, the television was still on, and Janine was nowhere to be seen. The young girl's lifeless body was found in a forested location not far from her home 2 days later. She had been killed by beatings and rape. The Chicago suburb was scared by the kidnapping, which occurred throughout the day, but authorities could find no leads. When a $10,000 reward for information was offered, 20-year-old gang member Rolando Cruz and high school dropout Alejandro Hernandez began giving the police misleading information. They tried to obtain the reward money by framing each other in the murders in an utterly naive scheme. Rather, the police utilized these declarations to accuse Stephen Buckley and the 2 men of raping and killing Janine Nicarico. In February 1985, Cruz and Hernandez were found guilty despite the lack of any tangible proof. Each received a death sentence. Due to the jury's impasse, Buckley was never given a second chance. After his vehicle was spotted in the vicinity of the kidnapping, rape, and murder of 7-year-old Melissa Ackerman in June 1985, Brian Dugan was taken into custody. While under police arrest, Dugan confessed to 5 significant offenses. Among these were the rape and killing of 27-year-old Donna Schnorr, who he had run off the road and drowned in a quarry. He also claimed credit for the rape and killing of Janine Nicarico. Dugan entered a guilty plea to the killings of Ackerman and Schnorr, but his statement regarding the killing of Jeanine was not followed through on. Cruz and Hernandez's convictions, meanwhile, were reversed in 1989 following an appeal. Although a new trial was given to each man, Dugan's confession was not used as supporting evidence in any of them. Both defendants were found guilty once more in the early 1990s. Hernandez received an 80-year prison term, while Cruz received a death sentence. Cruz was given a second trial order in 1994. After testing, it was discovered that neither Cruz nor Hernandez's DNA was found in the murder of Jeanine. Furthermore, a police officer who testified in the previous cases withdrew his testimony. Cruz was therefore acquitted in November 1995, and Hernandez was freed a month later. Each of the two men won 7-figure settlements from the county and 6-figure sums from the state after serving 12 years in prison, including time on death row. Dugan, who had acknowledged the killings back in 1985, was the only person whose DNA was found to match. In 2009, he received a death sentence for the murder of Jeanine. However, after Illinois abolished the death sentence in 2011, it was commuted to life in prison. Number 2. Huugjilt. In 1996, in the textile mill located in Huugjilt, Inner Mongolia, in northern China, an 18-year-old man named Huugjilt discovered the body of a woman in the restroom. After Huugjilt called the police, he soon became the only person they had as a suspect. China was then taking a firm stand against crime. It was advocated that robust and prompt justice be administered by the courts and police. Thus, following a 2-day interrogation period, Huugjilt admitted, in 61 days he was found guilty and put to death by firing squad. Unfortunately, the police made a mistake that resulted in the true killer, Zhao Jihong, being free to roam around with terrible repercussions. In the ensuing 9 years, Zhao killed 10 persons and sexually assaulted 13 women and girls. In 2005, he was eventually apprehended. He admitted to the killings and rapes, including the one for which Huugjilt was put to death. Zhao was found guilty after going on trial in 2006 for 9 murders. Zhao, often known as the Smiling Killer, was tried again 8 years later and found guilty of killing the woman in the textile plant. Huugjilt was found not guilty of the offense. After 18 years of seeking to cleanse his identity, his parents received compensation of 2.05 million yuan. Zhao was given a death sentence and put to death on July 30th, 2019. Number 1. Kevin Green. On September 30th, 1979, Kevin Green left his 9-month pregnant wife Diana alone at home in their Tustin, California apartment and went out for a cheeseburger. Upon his return, Kevin observed an African-American man getting into a vehicle and driving out of the apartment complex. Kevin discovered something horrifying when he entered his apartment. Diana had been severely beaten and sexually assaulted. She was unconscious when she was brought to the hospital. The decision to perform a cesarean section was made after a 24-hour period had passed. However, the infant daughter had passed away. Diana spent a full month in a coma. She experienced severe memory loss upon awakening, particularly in relation to the attack. Diana tried to refresh her memory when she returned home to live with Kevin following her discharge from the hospital. Diana abruptly remembered the attack and said that her husband had carried it out when she was reading a pregnancy magazine. She said he lost it because she had refused to have sex with him. Kevin was apprehended and found guilty of the attempted murder of Diana and the second-degree murder of his unborn daughter based only on her evidence. He received a prison term ranging from 15 years to life. Santa Ana detectives were aware of the new CODIS technology in 1996. The bedroom basher, an unidentified serial killer who broke into the homes of 5 women between the ages of 17 and 31 in 1978 and 1979, was the subject of their desire to test DNA. After entering, he used a hammer or a 2x4 to strike each woman in the head. He raped the women after that. After running the DNA, the detectives discovered a man called Gerald Parker who was incarcerated for a prior offense. They also discovered that Parker had carried out at least one other attack, which resulted in Diana Green's baby's death. Kevin was freed from prison in June 1996 following a 16-year sentence, as confirmed by the DNA evidence. Kevin received an apology from the judge as well as more than $600,000 from the state. Unexpectedly, Diana sued Kevin for their daughter's wrongful death when he was freed. That fateful night, she said, Kevin had attacked her before he left the flat. Diana claimed that as a result, she was rendered semi-conscious and open to Parker's attack. They reached a settlement outside of court, and Kevin has always insisted that he never injured his wife. Parker admitted it when the piles of evidence were laid bare. In 1999, he received a death sentence. Thanks for joining us on this eye-opening journey through these tragic cases. It's haunting to think how justice can sometimes go so horribly wrong, with lives destroyed and real killers left to continue their rampages. If you found this video informative or chilling, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into dark and twisted true crime tales. Let us know in the comments which case shocked you the most, and remember, in the world of true crime, nothing is ever as it seems. Stay curious, stay cautious, and we'll see you next time on Creepshow.